Friends, it was a Brazilian Grand Prix full of twists. We saw Verstappen's comeback, starting from the pit lane and finishing third. Kimi Antonelli's second place. Lando Norris's great victory, confirming him as the leader in the World Championship, but especially the incident involving Piastri, Kimi Antonelli, and Leclerc, with Leclerc coming off the worst, retiring, and Piastri receiving a 10-second penalty. Let's see together what Piastri should have done and why he made a mistake. So let's take a look from the onboard, from, let's say, the rear wing view of Norris. We see that all three are side by side after the restart following the safety car, and we see them coming here into turn 1, and Piastri is squeezed to the left. There was no space to attack at this point, also because Kimi Antonelli had, let's say, chosen the braking point, decided to brake there and then close the trajectory as is right, and we see that Piastri was not completely alongside Kimi Antonelli. Unfortunately, Leclerc was here on the outside, and if we go forward, he is then hit by Kimi Antonelli, who goes to cause this collision that then leads to the retirement of Leclerc. It's a shame because the car was unmanageable in that condition, meaning it couldn't continue the race. It's unfortunate because Leclerc was unaware at that moment. He sought the outer trajectory to stay out of trouble, and instead, they hit him. In this case, Antonelli had some damage but managed to continue the race, whereas Piastri was penalized. Let's first take a look at Leclerc's onboard. Let's take a look together at how and why he was hit by the other two. Here he stays a bit on the outside. We see the hit against Kimi Antonelli. And Kimi is also lucky because he could have had worse damage, hitting the front left of Leclerc. And let's move on. I'll show you the view from Piastri, which is the most interesting, and we'll see together what happened and why Piastri made a mistake. At this point in the race, in my opinion, Piastri was chasing the group in front of him. He was itching to catch Norris, so he thought, I'll take advantage of the restart to pass them all. Also because Kimi didn't get a great restart after the safety car, he was a bit slow off the line, which is why Leclerc moved to the outside, and so Piastri thought, I'll dive to the inside. But the problem with Sao Paulo, the first corner of Interlagos, is that it seems wide from the straight, but then it narrows a lot, becoming a funnel, so you can't take the inside trajectory. And you, as a possible world champion like Piastri, who is fighting for the title, can't think of taking such a big risk. In fact, Piastri threw away the title today. I say it here, and I don't deny that with this maneuver, Piastri threw away the title. He made a wrong move, not one of a potential world champion, unconsidered, driven by instinct, and he then paid the consequences. A 10-second penalty is fair. They could have been even stricter in race direction, but it's fair because he's fighting for the championship. And anyway, Antonelli had a bit of space on the right, but I repeat, later I will justify Antonelli's position as well, but that's not the point. Let's look at Piastri now. Let's see Piastri, because at this moment he is on the inside. We see he arrives at the braking point here. He's also a bit ahead compared to Kimi, who brakes later. And at this moment, you see Kimi is approaching the curve. Piastri doesn't have space. To the left, he must try to go right. But Kimi has already decided how to brake. In what way? Even with the car directly pointed towards the curve, and not maybe with the car more pointed towards the outside as Piastri had it. So he closes in. And Piastri at this moment, you see, is not aligned with Antonelli's mirror. So he is not ahead, not side by side, next to Antonelli. In this case, Piastri doesn't have the right to take this trajectory here, and that's why any contact coming from this corner is Piastri's fault. So let's take a look. Let's move forward. Here he also goes into a lockup, and this is an important point because a lockup means he didn't have control of the front tires at this moment, so it's normal for him to go straight. There's no space at this moment. And we see that he then makes contact in this case with the rear left of Kimi Antonelli, which then touches the front left of Leclerc. A move not befitting a potential world champion EEE. It's a move that truly shows Piastri's difficulty in these last races, in knowing how to manage pressure, in knowing how to manage the car in mixed conditions or slippery track conditions, because that's what Interlagos was today. On the contrary, his teammate has been reborn with the car he has in hand. Norris, in the last races, is doing everything he wants with the McLaren and manages to adapt well to different conditions, whether the asphalt is wet, there's rain, or there's dry asphalt, and he manages to extract the maximum potential from the car without being distracted by everything around him. On the contrary, in this case, Piastri was affected by the pressure, including the media pressure that's been put on him, that's been directed against him. In my opinion, he also suffered from a bit of inexperience because we have to consider that he is still a young driver, younger than Norris, and it's normal that he needs to gain more experience on the track. But this mistake shows us that even Piastri is not infallible, and in fact, in the last races, he has been making too many, really many mistakes. And so this is a shame, especially for Ferrari, because we will talk about it now, but Ferrari retired with both drivers. Here we see the image of Leclerc, who retired in this case, and later we will also talk about Lewis Hamilton. But it's a real shame because Ferrari could certainly have done more with Leclerc. With Hamilton, we could have hoped for a comeback. Now let's talk about everything together. Before we start, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any videos. Wait a moment, in Formula 1, we analyze every incident that happens on the track, and I also share my opinion on what the drivers should have done. In short, I tell you a bit of everything by analyzing every single incident. That being said, let's talk about Ferrari now, because there's quite a bit to say on the matter. Actually, let's first finish the analysis I did on Piastri's accident, because there's a theory that has emerged saying that Antonelli made a mistake. He should have left space for Piastri and moved to the right. In fact, this user points out that there was space in the red area, so it's Kimi's fault for closing the trajectory too much in this case. Not Piastri's, who actually had his space. He went into a lockup and then lost control. But according to the user, he still had control even when he locked up. Well, that's nonsense because when you lock the wheels, you don't have control of the front axle. So that's a fact. It's motorsport physics, if you will. And on the contrary, with Antonelli, it's not so much the space he leaves on the outside, but the braking point when you decide to brake. Because if Kimi decides to brake, leaving little space for the person on the inside, if he took that trajectory and is ahead, he can stay on that trajectory. It's the person on the inside who needs to have they need to figure out whether they can make contact or not. In this case, Piastri thought he wouldn't make contact, but he locked his wheels and made contact with Kimi. Kimi had taken his trajectory. You can't move him from there, whether it's more internal or external. And it's also Charles who widened his trajectory, because in this case, in turn 1, you don't take Leclerc's trajectory. Leclerc took this trajectory to stay away from trouble, to stay away from problems, and so he took a much wider trajectory than usual. Kimi is slightly tighter than usual, but he took his trajectory, and so it's not Antonelli's fault in this case. But it's obviously all Piastri's fault, who locked up and made contact with Kimi. I want to emphasize this because several theories had emerged. In this case, I think the Federation acted well by giving Piastri a 10-second penalty. They could have given more, perhaps yes, but there is still a restart phase, an initial race phase. We can say that anyway, the contact wasn't like that, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't strong, so 10 seconds are appropriate. Even Tsunoda was penalized with a 10-second penalty for a similar contact, if you will. But it was truly a misjudgment by Piastri. However, for a potential world champion, I think he can't afford to make such a mistake. I want to reiterate this because Piastri seemed like the perfect driver and he did many very good races when the conditions were perfect and he had control of the car. On the contrary, I think Norris created many problems for himself and had a lot of psychological pressure on him. Since Norris managed to free himself from this pressure, he has made a great grow up in the sense that he has grown a lot and made this additional step in terms of experience. Here, I show you the standings of the Sao Paulo race with Norris winning in Brazil, Antonelli in second, Verstappen third, and we must talk about Verstappen because he had an amazing race, an incredible comeback starting from the pit lane, and a great podium finish. 4th Russell, 5th Piastri, who despite the penalty finishes 5th, 6th Behrman. Then the 2 Racing Bulls, Lawson 7th, Hadjar 8th, 9th Hülkenberg, 10th Gasly. This is the top 10, and then I point out the 2 Ferraris, Hamilton 18th and Leclerc 19th. With Hamilton retiring after a long time also because he had to serve a penalty on the track that I think wasn't fair. Now let's talk about it, but let's go step by step to analyze everything. First, let's take a look. Well, there was Norris' reaction here when he saw the clash between Piastri, Kimi, and Leclerc.
Oh my God.
Also, Verstappen commenting there. That being said, let me show Kimi. He finished in the points, achieving a great second place. He has more points at this moment than Hamilton in 2007 in his first season. 122 points for Kimi, 109 for Hamilton. This is a very important fact that shows us Kimi's strength, who has been doing an excellent second half of the season since after Monza. He's having an amazing second half of the season, so congratulations to Kimi. I even wrote to him privately, and he had a great weekend here in Brazil. Really congratulations without errors, truly great. And now let's first talk about the Ferrari situation. Let's talk about Hamilton, because Hamilton was penalized 5 seconds on track. Here it is. Hamilton, received a 5-second penalty on track, which is why he continued to race even though the car wasn't up to par. He made several pit stops. First to change the wing, then they fixed it obviously. They removed the wing that was stuck in the bottom. They tried to fix the car, but it wasn't working, guys. Hamilton didn't have it because the car was destroyed after what happened at the start. And indeed, I'll show you how Hamilton's car was. You see, it was stuck underneath a completely destroyed car. And in my opinion, Hamilton then made contact with Colapinto, which caused him the 5-second penalty. But that contact wasn't intentional. He didn't have control of the car. In my opinion, you can't penalize a driver who can't do anything to change the circumstances, in the sense that he had a damaged car. He couldn't do anything else. Sure, it was his fault anyway, because he could have been a bit less aggressive, but 5 seconds seemed excessive to me. Ferrari did well to leave Hamilton on the track to serve the 5-second penalty in this race and not the next one. That's why they left him on the track for so long. And it makes sense. At least he doesn't have grid penalties in the next race, but served in 5 seconds here in Brazil, which doesn't change anything for him because he retired in the end. So really a disastrous weekend for Ferrari, we can say, because this double retirement in the sprint was unwanted and we expected in the sprint weekend. This double retirement in the sprint weekend was unwanted, and in this race Leclerc could have done much better. Obviously he was unlucky to be hit and too bad for Hamilton because he could have done better too. Here I'll show you another image of Hamilton's bottom that was touching. It was really all damaged. It couldn't go on. The car wasn't turning, and so this somewhat caused the situation we saw. In fact, then we saw Hamilton in the garage on lap 42, and he retired because he had too much damage to the bottom, and so he couldn't finish the race, and to also try to preserve the engine, it was right to retire him. Too bad for the penalty that I didn't quite understand, because in my opinion, it wasn't justified in this case, because he didn't have control of the car, and so it wasn't Hamilton's fault directly for that contact. That said, we also have to talk about the magic Verstappen did, guys, from the pit lane to third position. A phenomenon. And we say it many times, but I never get tired of saying it. He had an incredible race, lap times. He keeps improving. Good strategy, but if we see, he did 7 laps with the hard, then stopped mounting the medium, then did 27 laps with the medium, mounted another medium, and then stopped again mounting the soft. When we were at the 50th lap, maybe a bit further, 53rd, 54th lap, he stopped to mount the soft. I said, well, but you could continue. You could carry the race further with more laps. Do more laps with that medium compound, and do a bit like Behrman, who did 35 laps with the medium, so continue to the end doing hard medium medium instead of hard medium medium soft. That soft, that fair that pit stop that Verstappen made at the end, in my opinion, affected him. It's true that he then managed to come back, almost reached second, because then Kimi kept him behind at the end, but he reached 3/10 from Kimi. We see it here. And so anyway, Verstappen's race was excellent, and they extracted the maximum potential. But perhaps Verstappen could have been left on track with the medium tire at the end and tried to grab the win or even the second position, which I think was feasible. So in my opinion, they made a bit of a mistake there. They could have dared to leave Verstappen on track. But anyway, a great comeback by Max, because he had an extraordinary race. All clean overtakes, aggressive, just right. And he did it at Interlagos. He always goes super fast. And it's not the first time he's proven it. He proved it last year, starting 17th and finishing first. He proved it in 2016 with an amazing race in the wet. In short, Max is really strong on this track, and he proved it once again. I also point out these statements here from Lando Norris about about Verstappen. It was a nice victory. I commented on Norris's that way, and yet seeing how fast Max was, it's a bit disappointing to see that we weren't faster than the 4-time world champion. So Norris kind of saw the glass half empty rather than half full. But in this case, Norris had a very, very good race in my opinion and showed us that Max, with the dry setup, a slightly less loaded setup, could go very fast and potentially, if he had started further ahead, he could have won the race comfortably. It's a shame because for him, regarding the championship, he has practically lost the title because if we also look at the standings, we see Norris at 330 points, Piastri at 366 points. So at the moment, there are 24 points difference between the two McLaren drivers and then 341 points for Verstappen, which is a 49-point difference with Norris. So there are still many points difference between Norris and Verstappen, making it practically impossible to recover. Piastri isn't in the right shape. As we've mentioned for a few races now, he's struggling a lot. So in my opinion, the championship is all in the hands of Norris, who had a great race. Mentally, he's fresher, hasn't made any bold statements to the media, remains focused in my opinion. He's in good mental shape. We know his talent. He's a very fast driver. He doesn't just show us today that he's such a fast driver. Norris has always had talent. The issue was developing mentally. At this moment, we see him more mature compared to the past. Additionally, I want to highlight the constructors' standings. We see that Mercedes moves back ahead of Ferrari and takes second place. In this case, Mercedes has 368 points, while Ferrari is third with 362 points. In my opinion, it will be a battle between Mercedes and Ferrari that we'll see until the end of the championship, between who will manage to clinch second place in the Constructors' Championship. The double retirement of Ferrari in this race heavily affects the fight for second place in the Constructors. And so this is also a shame for Ferrari, besides the double retirement, which is truly the worst situation a team wants to face. A double retirement interrupted by unfavorable circumstances, both Leclerc's, which we analyzed earlier, and also Hamilton's at the start due to various contacts, especially since he was touched at the end by Tsunoda, which was the main contact. Really unfortunate, and then also the contact with Colapinto and the resulting penalty. So this is a bit of the situation of the race. I must say I really enjoyed the restart, Max's overtakes. We saw an excellent race also by Behrman, who has been impressing us for some races now. In fact, he finished 6th and executed a very good strategy, soft, medium, and made excellent use of his car in overtaking. He managed to make good overtakes at turn 1 by immediately going inside and also had good defense at the end. In short, he had a great race. Then Lawson finishing 7th surprised me because I expected him to be further back, but he managed to keep behind a train of drivers all closely packed from Ajar all the way to Alonso, who were all closely packed, leading to a very intense mid-pack battle. But Behrman emerged in the mid-group, so a lot of things great. Having said that, guys, tell me in the comments how you saw this race, Ferrari's double retirement, the bad luck the red team experienced. Hopefully, we'll recover in the next races, and hopefully Hamilton will manage to recover too, because we saw him struggling a bit. And surely the negative qualifying also affected today's race, because trying to climb back isn't easy. And Leclerc's bad luck continues. Every time Leclerc is more and more unfortunate, hopefully this bad luck he has ends. Tell me your thoughts on the contact involving Piastri, Kimi, Antonelli, Leclerc, and obviously Norris's victory. Verstappen's comeback that brought him to the podium. I'm curious to read and respond to everyone. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That's all from Raza here. See you in the next video.